Hey guys, welcome to the Learn Feng Shui podcast, where you'll learn Feng Shui from a classical point of view, taking out the myth and superstition. So if you're interested in learning Feng Shui, Chinese astrology, all things Chinese metaphysics, as well as the superstitions and myths that connect it all, you'll enjoy learning Feng Shui with me. Hey guys, welcome back to the Learn Feng Shui podcast, where we explore the fascinating world of Feng Shui and how it impacts our everyday lives. I'm Candice Berling, a certified Feng Shui practitioner and red ribbon professional with the International Feng Shui Guild, and of course, your host for the Learn Feng Shui podcast. Today, we're discussing a topic that's actually pretty crucial for anybody thinking about buying a home, or even if you're just curious about how the environment can shape or impact the energy around you. Did you know that about 70% of your feng shui is influenced by your external environment? And when it comes to choosing a home, what's around it, like the landforms, roads, and even neighboring buildings, can play a huge role in shaping the energy that actually flows into your space. So that's why for today, I chose Joey Yap's Feng Shui for Homebuyers Exterior Edition as this month's featured book. It's an essential guide for anyone looking to assess their property's feng shui before making one of the biggest investments of their life. In this episode, we're going to explore key insights from the book and practical tips for evaluating the external surroundings of a potential home. Again, today's book is Feng Shui for Home Buyers Exterior Edition, written by Joey Yap, who is the founder of the Mastery Academy of Chinese Metaphysics and chief consultant of the Joey Yap Consulting Group. He is one of the world's foremost authorities in Chinese metaphysics and a prolific author of 186 books and counting. I think that's pretty amazing. All right, guys, let's get into the book. Starting off with a little bit of overview and format of the book, this Feng Shui for Home Buyers Exterior Edition does focus on these fundamental Feng Shui principles of forms. This does refer to the shape and structure inside and outside of a space that can influence the flow of energy or qi. In this case, we're looking at the outside. This approach falls under the category of what is called physiognomy, which is part of the five arts of Chinese metaphysics. And it is the assessment of the visual environment. And it also falls under the category of like the face or palm reading. And if you've been listening for a little while, earlier this year, I featured a gentleman that does boob reading. That falls under the category of physiognomy. It's a visual assessment of something to understand how it can impact an energy. Although the book, it doesn't emphasize that these forms are universal to all styles of feng shui. In fact, he's very, very classical, and he will dispel anything that is not mentioned in the classic text. It is actually accessible, and it can be applied universally to all styles of feng shui. Last month, we featured the Karen Rosh Carter's book, Move Your Stuff, Change Your Life. And even in that book, in BTB style feng shui, they discuss the fact that your back is supposed to be against a solid wall, or you're supposed to be able to see the door from your bed with your bed being against the solid wall, not up against a window and things like that. This falls under the category of forms. So if you do practice BTB style of feng shui and you want to step up your game a little bit and you want to be able to assess your external environment, or maybe you're in the market for a home, this could be the book for you. And again, it doesn't really clash with any other style of feng shui. And where he does dispel some of these myths, I'll get into it later on in the book, but you can basically just kind of disregard it if you don't agree, and it will still be able to be applied to any style of feng shui. Okay. So Joey Yap's modern take on feng shui is really helpful. Also, modern in a sense that he navigates today's more urban environments in the book, where there's buildings and roads and man-made structures that come into play. So these shape our energy also, something ancient feng shui couldn't do because it focused on natural landforms. We didn't have 5G towers and drains, man-made ditches to aid in storm water drain off, right? So it didn't address as much. And in this book, he does avoid a lot of complicated topics, which makes it a little bit easier to follow. And even those without like a formal feng shui training, The purpose of the book is to guide home buyers in assessing the property's external feng shui by helping them narrow down their options and spot potential red flags. And it can be a practical tool for anyone looking to make an informed decision when selecting a home with a focus on the modern external environment. The format of the book is a little bit of a brief introduction, and he kind of talks about how he breaks it down into five categories, which are land, mountain, water, roads, and open spaces. There's a lot of pictures and examples, which I find pretty straightforward. And there is a section at the end that dispels myth and talks about what is not classical feng shui. And there is a bagua stencil in the back that you can like cut out of the book, made out of vellum paper to overlay over your home. Again, exterior feng shui is often overlooked when home buying, but it is crucial to evaluate your property's energy, and it does help you pick out a home that can be enhanced rather than fixed, which he does discuss here also. He's very adamant on that. You want to maybe even narrow it down to three or four choices and then pass it on to a feng shui consultant. That way, you've at least identified the best pieces of land and you can automatically sort out negative features that can negatively impact the energy of your home. Now, looking at some of the key concepts that are covered in this book, he has a good intro and where he introduces a lot of the concepts and kind of talks about how your home is your castle. It needs to be comfortable and create a harmonious environment for you. He encourages you to look at it practically and take away superstition. So he talks about even if you don't really believe in feng shui or don't necessarily practice feng shui, somebody would be hesitant to buy a home where there was an electric line, directly in somebody's backyard, right? Maybe there's a pylon there. This would be something you would really consider before you would purchase a home. What if there is a power plant really close by? These are things that can impact your energy. Whether you believe in feng shui or not, you look at these things and they could be a red flag right away. It'll give you a second thought about purchasing the property. And he takes a very classical approach. He talks about how to harness chi, how to identify features that collect chi, and how to avoid sha or chis or negative chi. He kind of explained various types of feng shui and how they relate to time space. And he talks about how these forms were actually used prior to formulas. When we're talking about formulas, we're talking about classical concepts like the flying stars or even eight mansions, where you're looking at your best and worst directions. These forms will actually supersede any kind of formula. So you have to look at these forms before you look at the formula. These things like mountains, rivers, buildings, even furniture can guide how the energy moves through your space and can determine how it affects your health, harmony, and prosperity in relationships. This concept of form is a lot of the basis of how feng shui was actually developed. Before using any kind of formula, before compasses came around, feng shui masters would actually just walk the land and they would use these different formations to decide where to build towns and houses and even cemeteries, things like that. And the feng shui masters never considered directions and all these little formulas. They didn't have that. It actually predates the formulas. Here in the book, I like that it says most people can perceive a mountain or river or make out a shape of a building or determine whether or not it's sharp. It doesn't take a lot to learn if something is pointing at your main door, but learning formulas requires time and indeed a lot of basic knowledge and understanding. There's an old saying in ancient class, there's no fake forms and no real formulas. Essentially, it means that what is in the environment and the landform must always be considered before any formulas are applied. If you're looking at landform first, you're already taking an important step towards checking your feng shui in a way that a professional classical feng shui consultant would. Forms will supersede a formula. This is actually considered before you look at anything else. And there is actually schools that only consider form and landform, and they don't use any formula at all. So just something to kind of consider there. As long as you follow what are called these feng shui rules, you can take out complicated formulas and honestly, you're kind of on a fast track and just using that visual assessment and the skill of that physiognomy, which feng shui is based on. He talks about the concepts also of heaven, earth, and man, and talks about how destiny analysis will go hand in hand. And that destiny analysis is that natal or that Batsa chart, the zodiac signs that I talk about each month. So he talks about why the two go hand in hand. He does also mention that you do have to know the house's facing and sitting direction. And he explains how to take a compass reading and how to find the front facing facade of your home. This is why I ask you to do this when I ask for this information in an energy mapping. When I do those for people, sometimes people will just send it to me with no context. And I promise I'm not just trying to ask for your address and see where you live. I can just easily look it up on Google Maps and very easily take that compass direction of your home. So it's just easier for me to do sometimes. So I'm not being creepy and I don't save your information. But it is important when taking the reading of the home. It's not absolutely essential, and you could just look at the visuals if you'd like to. And some of this information you can skip because it gets a little in depth. Even though he says he doesn't go into formulas, he gets into some information where he talks about the trigrams and the representations. So if you'd like to layer that info in, you can. But he breaks down how each energy or like the facing direction can affect the home and the occupants. But I would rather encourage you to start slow and just look at that visual environment. Another thing he talks about is asking, will this affect me? The one thing that it differs from like last month when I looked at Karen Rosh Carter's book. He talks about avoiding buying these homes where they can't be fixed and more along the lines of enhancing a home that has good feng shui already rather than fixing a home that you purchase that you're like, oh no, it has these negative features. Because especially external features, it's easier to again enhance and activate areas of the home rather than try to fix something that you could have avoided in the first place. One thing I will say is if you already own a home and you read through this book and you're like, oh no, there's a specific sector I think that might be negative, you can try to bring in concepts from other styles, kind of like, so as discussed in Move Your Stuff, Change Your Life, where she talks about adding heavy things with heavy energy, such as a stone, or uplifting energy, such as light. You can apply some of these concepts, but it might not fix it 100%. Sometimes things can be fixed with some landscaping also, which he does kind of discuss in the book, especially things like T junctions and stuff like that. He discusses feng shui in terms of harnessing the qi in your natural environment, which is a lot of what I look at. I will say that I'm very heavily inspired by Joey Yap. His books are the first ones I've read, and the first courses I took that were true classical feng shui that I was just really hooked on. And again, this is kind of why I dispel a lot of myth too. He does say here in this book, we'll be looking at basic landform concepts and principles, and I'll be talking about how landform can be used to block, redirect, repel, or collect chi, depending on whether it's a negative energy or a positive energy. We discuss the concept of what he calls chi collection and the concepts of direct and indirect spirit, which again, I think might be a little bit of an intermediate concept to somebody new to feng shui. I know that when I read this stuff, if I was looking through this introduction part of the book and I had not previously learned some of this stuff, I would have not known what to do with this information, or I would have thought that it's too much information coming at me. Even though he frames it as a beginner book, I will say with this intro, it's a little bit more in depth than you think it might be. Just don't get confused and take the information that stands out to you. Getting into specifics here, he talks about land contour, landforms, and mountains, in which he talks about hills, slopes, and surrounding natural features. He does also discuss shapes, rocky mountains, green mountains, mountains that are full of trees and things like that. So not just necessarily the shape of the mountain itself, but also, is it a good mountain? Is it a healthy looking mountain? Um, Water elements, he talks about the impacts of rivers, lakes, and ponds on the property, about water as a container of chi. And he also discusses things like drains and areas for water runoff, manholes flowing and stagnant water, and in clean versus dirty water. And one thing that I think has always been interesting to me is that he does discuss the sound of water. And he talks about if things are too loud, and the same with streets. In terms of roads and streets, he talks about how road positioning can influence the flow of energy, things like T junction, sharp curved roads, in being close to the side of the highway, slopes, alleyways, things like that, and how that can impact you. And of course, like I mentioned, the noise, neighboring structures. He talks about the influence of neighboring structures and buildings like schools, hospitals, and graveyards, fences and gates and driveways, open spaces like parks, golf courses, but even the shape of things like roof lines, like A-frame houses and L-shaped houses. So the shape of your house is also a little bit of soil assessment and soil quality. Land shapes, which is helpful in picking a lot. So he talks about odd shaped lots, missing sectors in lots, and how that shape can impact you. And then the celestial guardians, which are the green dragon, white tiger, black tortoise, and red phoenix, and how those relate to your home. Some of the key takeaways that I would definitely look for in this book would be starting slow. But one of the most important is the celestial guardians. Okay. So I just mentioned that. So the concept of the celestial guardians is that it's this idea of like a land embrace and the land supports you. But you can look at this in terms of the modern environment in your home also, in which he discusses in the book. But more practically, the left side is where energy comes in from, and you want this to be a little bit higher as it represents the masculine energy of the household. And it's supposed to have an embrace. So maybe there's a higher house on that side, or there's a hill on that side, or the land, is a little bit higher on that side. Maybe there's a little bit of a slope. On the right side, you want to have the white tiger, which is a little bit lower of a land contour. Maybe the house on that side is lower and that area needs to be more quiet. The tortoise in the back talks about support in the back. Maybe that's a fence line. Maybe it's a little bit of a mountain or a hill, or just a little bit higher area, or a house that is bigger than yours in back of you. And then you want the red phoenix to be open in the front, which is just really where you receive chi, and this little concept of a bright hall where it can gather and collect. Again, it's about chi or energy collection. So that red phoenix is where it's supposed to be a little bit open in front of your home, such as like a yard or a driveway or a little bit of a patio into your home, where this little space of chi can collect energy. The celestial guardians, to me, is one of the most impactful things you can look for into making sure that form is correct in your space. The second is the lot shape, because if you have an irregular lot shape, or irregular, even a home shape, like an L-shaped home, if the lot shape is triangular, or if there's sectors missing, that is going to impact a specific area of your life. A certain energy maybe will be missing. Maybe a specific energy will be very dominant. Like if it's a triangle shaped lot or a pointy shaped lot, the fire energy will be very dominant. And it might not impact you, but assessing whether or not you want to risk that is up to you, right? So the lot shape is very important to consider. Another thing to consider, like the most important thing to me, is your front door, and making sure that is not facing any shaws, which would be like if you look directly across from when you look at your front door, if there's things intersecting your front door, such as like a roof line. Like my sister used to live in an apartment where you opened the door, and there was the roof line from the neighboring building was, like basically you looked out and it would be intersecting the door. Okay, so that's receiving a negative energy. Maybe you can pick a unit that's next door to that instead of picking that unit. It can be as simple as pick the unit that's doesn't have the shachi facing the front door. Electric lines, electric towers, things you would definitely consider in your vicinity, like there's a water tower or just something very close, maybe that makes a lot of noise. If there's a fire station close by, that those are going to be red flags to you. So just consider like these things that you can see in like right from your front door, okay? Because those will impact you the most. And he does give steps like 1 through 6 in the book. At the end of the book, he like walks you through steps 1 through 6 of evaluating property, but it may be a little bit overcomplicated without the guidance of a person that has done feng shui or a person that has former knowledge of classical feng shui. Me and my husband, we really do want a little bit bigger of a home. We want somewhere to retire to. We're okay in a space we have now, but our eyes are always open. And there's been several times where I've stopped and looked at properties and I thought, oh my gosh, like this is a really good deal, or it's a bank sale. We could get a real good deal on this house, but I did not pursue because there were definitely red flags. And when I first purchased this book, I had already been practicing for a couple years and I knew a little bit about the external environment. But a lady I was doing a little bit of mentoring on for date selection, she recommended I buy this book when I told her I was looking at land and looking at houses. And we did not put an offer in because we realized the back of the property was lower and that can affect your descendants. Obviously, they're going to be in this home. I don't want to risk not holding on to our wealth for our descendants, right? We don't want to risk that. And having your property lower in the back can do that. And also, it had a pool that was not in line with what is called the direct and indirect spirit, which is basically where you want to see mountains and water. Okay. Again, a concept that Joey Yap he does outline in this book, but it was in the area like that, and it would actually impact our sons. And I thought, okay, well, let's not buy this, right? Let's not buy this. And then I know there was another property I looked at, and I really loved the home. It was a beautiful kind of classic looking home. When you looked at the front door, it was directly facing like this roundabout, but that roundabout also had a big, like, kind of monolith type stone just set in it that was supposed to be the marker for this neighborhood. So I was like, I don't think that that's a good property. So it's actually stopped me from buying a couple different properties. Just again, the concept of the celestial guardians, and then just the concept of looking practically out your front door to see what you see. These are things that I just looked at casually that they're just red flags. Just as a further testament to how important the concept of the celestial guardians is, me and my husband had been having a lot of relationship issues. Again, that's one of the reasons I started doing feng shui. But it was a lot of it was caused by some mental health issues that he was himself was just experiencing. And I again try to apply feng shui in many different ways. It was really a thing where he was just very angry all the time. And I you can't fix that. It has to be something the person themselves goes through, is introspection. At one point, I had had a reading done when I was taking a class on the art of Chimin Dujia, which is a divination system. And I asked about my husband's mental health. One of the things that came out in the reading was to look at the west side of my home. Our room is in the west side of the house. And so I just thought maybe it's just the room. Maybe the room doesn't mesh with his energy and whatnot. Well, some years later, when I was having a little home assessment with my current feng shui master, he had mentioned something about the right side of my home, which is the white tiger side, which is in the west of my home. And so when we're talking this, we're talking about looking outside. And so from the facade of our home, to the right and the left, not looking inside our home, looking to the outside. He told me something was wrong with that side, and it dawned on me that my little doggy was always on that side of the house because I think because it was shielded from the sun. And so whenever she would go outside, she would go sit underneath our bedroom window on that side of the house, probably because she could hear us also. He really emphasized you need to keep that part of the house quiet. And he was just very perceptive in that. And I honestly don't remember what the conversation was about, but he told me you need to keep that side of the house quiet. I thought, okay. But I blocked that side off. I fenced it off. And from then, I do believe my husband's mental health has improved and quieted down. Remember, that's the side of the house that represents the feminine, and it needs to just be kept more quiet. And the left side or the green dragon side is the side you want to be more active. And it can make a huge impact. On top of that, we did build a little bit of a privacy fence because I do believe that there was another Shaw because you could see the top of the windows of the house behind us, which is what is called a peeping Tom Shaw, which does also induce a little bit of like paranoia and you feel like somebody's watching you. And these were all symptoms that my husband was having. And he is doing a lot better now. That with some inner work, I think has made a tremendous difference. So don't discount these really small, kind of innocuous things that you would think. Again, just looking at the celestial guardians, the lot shape, looking and affecting your front door, I think that that is a really good assessment. If you get this book and it's a little bit confusing to you, it's just because you don't need to use everything. Just like I'm not going to use mountain formulas because I don't have mountains near me, right? I might look for slopes and contours, but not a mountain formation. I'm not going to see that in my area. Just like if I don't have a river in a certain specific location, I'm not going to be able to tap into energy. So it's just, you have to look at what you're working with anyway. So half of these things probably won't apply to you anyways. But yeah, just using these few concepts, I think, are the most important and the key takeaway for any reader of this book. So, who do I recommend this book to? It's good for someone looking to purchase a property, whether it's a piece of land or a home. I don't think that it's as easy to follow as Mr. Yap thinks it is. So it might be a little easier for somebody who's familiar with classical feng shui, or again, you can just take out the info and pick the information that makes the most sense to you. I think that's one of the things too. When we start looking at new concepts, it's easy to say you're confused or you don't understand. But just know that if the only thing you took away was one thing, so if the only thing you took away is that, oh, this property looks good because it has a nice view and it has water to the side of it. Oh, perfect. You know what? If you feel like that's the property for you, then take it. So don't get too confused either. One thing that I think is that he's a little bit too rigid in his approach sometimes. Sometimes he's a little bit technical and he does throw in random references to like flying stars and timeliness that I think a beginner wouldn't understand. One thing that I do like is he will dispel myths and he shows that everything's not absolute. And in chapter 5, he does have a whole section dedicated to what is not feng shui according to his views. Okay. As far as use on the Bagua scale, remember one being the easiest, one Bagua being the easiest, three being expert level. I'd probably put it between 1 to 2. So not necessarily beginner, but not expert either. I think an intermediate user would find this easy to use. I think some of the main things that we got from this was how form can dictate the flow of energy. The shapes and structures around the property, like natural and man-made ones, do play a critical role in influencing the flow of energy, and that is important to understand. Modern feng shui for today's environment. Unlike traditional feng shui, which is focused more on natural landforms, this does take a little bit of a modern approach and talks about how to assess in urban and suburban environments and where man made structures are, and things like highways and just other infrastructure that can have a significant impact on you. It's supposed to be accessible for all levels. Take out the information you don't understand. He does talk about how he does avoid the complex charts. Honestly, if you just follow the pictures, I think you'll be fine. So more about the visual assessment, which again, you can look at from any school of feng shui. So anybody from any school of feng shui could use it. Of spotting the red flags, one of the key purposes of this book is to help home buyers identify the red flags, the things you definitely want to avoid and who it may impact. So I think that's a good takeaway there. And then practical decision making tools. So just simplifying the process of evaluating a property through a feng shui eye. The book can help readers narrow down their choices when it comes to house hunting and provide a little bit of a clearer and visual approach to assessing the energy without needing a proper feng shui training. So yeah, these takeaways from the book make it a practical guide for those looking to make an informed home buying decision based on these feng shui principles. It's an amazing book. And I highly recommend it. Highly, highly recommend it. All right, guys, this wraps up this month's book review. Joey Yap, Feng Shui for Homebuyers, Exterior Edition. Link will be in the show notes if you'd like to purchase that. Again, it just offers the simple, practical tips for evaluating a property's energy by focusing on external forms and your modern environment. So, whether you're a beginner or advanced, this book will definitely offer you some insight to help you spot these red flags and make a more informed decision when you choose your next home or even just look at your current home with a new feng shui eye. All right, I'll catch you guys not next week. I'm struggling a little bit this month, I suppose. I have just a lot going on, not in a bad way, but October is full of birthdays. And my birthday is actually on October 30th, the day before Halloween. So next week, honestly, after my busy, busy month, I'm going to be relaxing a little bit and getting the newsletter ready and everything ready for the energy update, which won't be out until November 8th. But that energy shift never occurs at the beginning of the month anyway. So it's okay. All right, guys. Well, if you want me to take a look at your external environment, need a little insight, yeah, I do offer that energy mapping, and that does include looking at the surrounding environment also. So we can take a look at that. Anyway, shoot me a message, and I'll catch you guys on November 8th for the energy update for the month of the pig.
For a free energy mapping of your floor plan, please check the link in the show notes. To support today's podcast, go to learnfengshui.com, sign up for emails, leave a review, and share with your family and friends.